his speech as well. It's tough times right now, and every advantage we can have is great. I'm going to show you something that's pretty simple, and you've all seen it, a green apple. You've probably seen this symbol on a couple of very important things. First of all, any ideas where you've seen this symbol on a corporate level?
Apple computers.
Apple computers. And? And? It may be a generational thing. What it is Apple Records. Apple Records is the Beatles record label.
Yes.
Okay? And there's a little small aside to that story, but I'll talk about that in a minute. First of all, as you probably know, Steve Jobs passed away this week. Steve Jobs was an incredible human being, and one of my favorite songs is called Imagine by John Lennon. And a couple of lines that stand out for me is, imagine all the world living as one. I'm paraphrasing here. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I only hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. It's a beautiful thought. The more you grow up and you get older, you realize how the core of these things are so important to you. And I think Steve Jobs had the imagination and could imagine things for people, and he always used that as his core. A little bit of history on Steve Jobs. Steve was actually an orphan. I've learned all this week, by the way, because this was a great week to learn about somebody that you kind of knew about but didn't know about, with all these tributes coming out. Steve was born an orphan, and his biological parents wanted him to have some really smart people as his parents. So they tried to pick a lawyer and everything, and that did not happen. But these other people wanted this child, and they accepted him. They were working people, salt of the earth people. They realized very early on that Steve was a very smart person. And they sent Steve to school. When he was 17, he went to, I believe, Reed College or Reed University in Portland, Oregon. While he was there for about 6 months, but realized his parents were spending their life savings on his education. And Steve could not see that happening, so he actually quit school. But he kept going to school, and he kept sleeping in friends' dorms on their floor. He says, this was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, quitting school, because now I could take the classes that I wanted to take. So he actually dropped in on all these classes. One of the classes that he dropped in on was calligraphy. He loved the beauty, the artistic nature, the flow of the way the things went, you know, the lettering and everything. Sanskrit, I guess that's the word. And he would use this later on, but all of Steve's life was surrounded by these various things that actually connected at one time. And that was his big thing, too, connecting all the dots. He took this calligraphy course and then moved back, and him and his friend Steve Wozniak, another Steve that he met, started fooling around in his parents' garage. They knew Steve was a genius. They let him fool around in the garage, and he started fooling around with these boxes, and they came up with the Apple computer. I might have some of these dates wrong, but anyway, the Apple computer was brought out and was very successful. He started this company and had the first personal computer, I believe, if I'm wrong, was it like in the 70s, right? And he also continued to grow his business, came up with a lot of different things, and was actually ousted from the company at one time because he was a very on-hands manager, I might say, micromanaged. Mm-hmm. And he hired CEOs. He hated that part of it, the CEO, the business part of it. He wanted to do all the inventing. So he was ousted for a while. Actually went to India also for a while and smoked some pot. And he took LSD. And he said later on, now he's a guy that's out there. But those are the kind of people that come up with the stuff that we love to use, you know, the music we love to hear. So he's out on a limb. That was his thing. And he come back with a whole new vision, you might say, and joined back with Apple. And he had a whole, once he was ousted from Apple, he had a whole new vision. He says, now that I'm not the CEO anymore, I'm a beginner again. I can learn, I can prosper, I can just use my imagination. He didn't have that pressure of business. And he thought that was another wonderful thing that happened to him. And so that's when his most creative period happened. I'm going all the way up to the 90s now. Like I said, I'm not sure of the times, but just the interesting parts of his history that matter to me. He came up with the iPod in 2000. That was a revolutionary thing. That was the start of the new age of Apple. Apple was almost on the outs. Apple was almost ready to go under. Hard to imagine these days. And then 5 years later, he come up with the iPhone. No, the iPhone was about 3 or 4 years old, guys and gals, I'm not sure. So the iPhone was another tremendous thing where you had the iPod, the internet, and everything on a phone. And now it's the standard by which everybody uses phones, smartphones. And then, of course, the iPad, about 1.5 years ago, I'd say, the iPad came out. And now, even though everybody's starting to make pads, they're not as nice or as intuitive, let me say. His whole thing was, as far as products, he wanted products that were, he wouldn't put anything out that was lousy. He wanted the best quality, the most intuitive, the most beautiful looking. He had an aesthetic about his products that people loved. And that was his whole thing. He said, I'm not putting anything out that people aren't going to love and you know how to use. And he wanted products, the way he went about getting products was that he wanted the end user amount. He started there, he says, if I was a user, what do I want? He didn't invent something and say, let's tell them how to figure out how to use it. That was his big thing. And one thing I want to end up, and unfortunately he passed away, but he passed away peacefully. He had been going through the struggle with pancreatic cancer for the last 5 years. I want to read one quote at his commencement speech in Stanford. It's about death. Don't freak out. It's not bad. Everybody dies. But this is his quote on his Stanford speech in 2005. And I hope you don't mind that I'm reading from the page here. No one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it, and that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention in life. It is life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you, but someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it's quite true. Your time is limited, and here's the crux of Steve Jobs and the way I'd love to live my life, if I could. So don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice, and most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become, and everything is secondary. Thank you very much, fellow Toastmasters.